evening, everyone. We're at that time of the year where the board will have to make the final decision. We made about 10 presentations, and this is the summary of those presentations and the conclusion of those presentations. So next one, please. Next one. So if you remember, that probably you don't, on January 6, we started our preliminary budget of $84.6 million. After some retirement and some adjustments to the budget, we are presenting an $84.3 million budget. That compares to $82.1 million from last year. That's an increase of $2.1 million or 2.6%. The tax levy is originally, we were expected to be at $49.5 million. Today, we have it at $48.4 million, an increase of 4.5% compared to last year. Next. CAP information. As always, I bring the CAP information because it's interesting, but really it's not important for us. The New York State CAP this year is 1.23%. If you remember, the CAP is the lesser of 2% or inflation. Inflation was 1.23%, so that's a New York State CAP. For us is 10.4%, and the reason is that any pilot payment lost goes against the cap. So any dollar that we lose in pilot payments, it goes against our cap. For Henry Hudson this year, our cap is $53 million compared to $48 million last year, or an increase of $5 million. And obviously, we're not even close to that number on the tax levy. Next. So these are our preliminary numbers compared to last year. State aid, actually today we got the final approval of the budget. And I'm happy to say that I was within $30,000 of the state aid. BOE's aid, basically the same, very close to that number. Other income, close to $1 million. Other income includes all the money that we get from other school districts to get to educate their special education children. Auctions that we do, anything that we sell, insurance that we get paid, etc., etc. Sales tax is the tax, the proportional part of the Westchester sales tax that we get. Supposedly, all the Westchester sales tax goes to school districts. I really doubt that, but this is a portion that I expect this year. The increase is due to the fact that last year there was a 1% increase in the Westchester sales tax, that it was not in our budget. And we got about $900,000 last year. So I expect about $160,000 more. Transfer is money that we need to transfer to other of our funds. Fund balance is the portion that we are using to reduce the tax levy, and that's one of the discussions that we had last Tuesday in Finance Committee. How much money in fund balance we should use so we can keep the tax levy at a reasonable increase. And we decided to use $2.2 million, which is $1 million more than what we originally suggested, to bring the proposed tax levy to 4.5%. Then the next line is pilots. We all know about pilots, and obviously the reduction in pilots is due to the Indian Point closing. And then for the first year, we are eligible for Cessation Fund, and that's going to be $8.4 million. So our non-property tax revenue is $35.8 million. Our proposed budget is 84.3, so the difference is a proposed tax levy, which is $48.4 million. Our proposed budget is an increase of 2.6%. Like I said, the tax levy is 4.5%. Again, the tax cap is $53 million, which is 10.4% compared to last year. And finally, the contingent budget. The contingent budget happens if the community decides to not approve the budget, to vote it down. In our contingent budget, the most that we can spend is $82.2 million, which will be a $2 million reduction in expenses that represents 4.3% of our tax levy. It means that we will have to reduce our tax levy by 4.3%. Next one, please. Here we have the historical numbers, and at the top you see the tax cap comparison. Up until 1920, you can see we were always lower than the New York State cap and the inflation. And then last year and this year, due to the Indian Point, you can see that our tax cap is much greater than either inflation or the New York State tax cap. In the bottom graph, you can see the increases in budget and tax levy. And as you can see, also the tax levy increases in the past were either minimum or negative, and starting last year, our tax levy started increasing. Last year was 5.9%, and this year our preliminary estimate is 4.5%. Next, please. This is how we divide our revenues. You can see it in the pie chart, what we saw two slides before, but like that you get an idea of how big our proposed tax levy is compared to any other of our revenues. Next. As always, we need to present our expenses by government accounting. That means we need to present it divided in three: the instructional program, the administrative budget, and the capital budget. Our instructional program is 82% of our total budget. Administrative budget is 6.3, and capital budget is 11.7. We strive to have at least 82% of our instructional program as part of our total budget. So this year we barely made it, but we're still within the 82% that we strive to be in. Next, please. Any questions or comments?
Alex?
So we're using the fund balance, which is our savings account. If we were not using that $2.2 million, what would have the tax levy been this year?
It depends how much we would decide to use. So
assume zero. If we borrowed none from the fund balance.
Every point in the tax levy is $436,000. So we will have to multiply 436 times 4.5
So 9.
So it would be 9%.
But
I
it's
mean,
it's a savings account, so we can't do this every year because eventually we just run out of money in the fund balance.
That's correct. And
That's
we're not planning to do this every year. Actually, the idea is that we are putting more money this year because next year we're going to do the Princeton plan, and we're going to use less fund balance. Today, we have about $11 million in fund balance. So we're using 2.2. So every year going forward, we're going to be using money out of that fund balance. This year, I expect to have between $2.5 and $3 million of fund balance. So for this particular year, basically our savings of this year, we're going to move them for next year. And we're still going to have a little bit of savings. So our fund balance either will increase by, I'll say, $500,000 to close to $11 million or stay the same. But without any doubt, this is not sustainable over the long term. This is a one-time decision that the Finance Committee decided to propose because of the difficult situation of some of the community members due to COVID.
Thank you.
Corey, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just, want to be clear, Enrique. It just, with the Cessation Fund and all the other funds that we are getting, these are also going to run out too, right? The pilot that we're getting is going to continue to decrease, and the Cessation Fund is going to continue to potentially decrease over time.
Yes,
Right. So eventually, we've got to make that up one way or the other.
That's correct.
So I think in the long run, we have to figure out, do we want the tax increases to look like a hockey stick, or do we want them to be gradual, which is what the fund balance is helping to accommodate with that. If we don't have additional significant savings, you're going to get more of the hockey stick when it comes to taxes.
Actually, the idea, Corey, that we decided, at least for this year, to let it go because of the COVID situation, is that our next 7 to 8 years, we will have increases of about between 4 and 5%. Like that, you don't have the hockey stick. Mm-hmm. So in the years, for example, in 23-24, we have several maturities of bonds. So we're going to be saving about $2 to $3 million. That particular year, I'm not planning to use any fund balance. And that particular year, in my projections, we have an increase in tax levy of about 4%. So that's what I'm trying in all my projections, is to be sure that we don't have peak and valleys, that suddenly one year, if my tax levy increase is 0.5 percentage point, but the following year is 8%.
Right.
I prefer to have 2 or 4%.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. And with those 4%, we will, in 8 years, we will make up all the pilot payments that we lost. And that's when the Cessation Fund and our fund balance will be depleted.
Yeah. So after about 10 years, it levels off. It goes-
After 10 years, I expect to be like any other district at the cap of no more than 2%.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And Corey, if I may, just to give everyone a look in the rearview mirror. So from 2013 to 19, our average tax increase over that time was 1.04%. Last year, the budget got approved at a tax levy increase of 5.9, and this year we're proposing 4.5, which could have been astronomically higher, as Alex asked. Now, when Indian Point announced their closure in 2017, the idea of the Cessation Fund was not on our radar. We didn't even know what that was. So we did projections. Enrique did projection. We shared them with the community as an awareness and advocacy tool, saying that taxes would have to increase 13% each year for 4 years, starting last year in 2020, in order to make up the delta from what we were expecting to receive from Indian Point to what we did. So we started with a high of 13, and we're more than halfway below that, which is still a sting to taxpayers because we're used to a 1% increase, but it's certainly not the 13. And again, this goes back to a financial predicament that we were put in because Indian Point's closure. I mentioned the Cessation Fund. I want to use this as one more opportunity. The Cessation Fund is state money that offsets the pilot. All right. It's not additional. It's not a grant. It's not for special use. It's money to avoid the hockey stick. And I want to be super clear that folks understand that these are dollars that offset the reduction of the pilot that we use to pay the bills, that we use for general use, right? We buy supplies and equipment and pay salaries and all of those things. So the Cessation Fund is not this pile of money that sits outside of our budget that is above and beyond or supplemental. It is part of our revenue stream, and we need it badly in order to not have huge tax increases or not have widespread program reductions.
Thank you.
I just want to mention Alexandra's question about not using any fund balance. I just want to make aware the whole board that since I started working here in 2008, every single year, even the tough years of 2010 and 2011, we use fund balance. Some years more, some years less, but it's always been part of our budget. So saying 9% increase, we always use at least 1 or 2%. So in that sense, I want to make it clear that we always use at least the $500,000 of fund balance.
Bill, did you have anything to add? Oh, sorry, Corey, go ahead.
That's all right, but there is a restriction on how much fund balance you can actually put into fund balance in normal years, right? You can't use it as a savings account in most normal years. We just have an exception at this point.
Actually, we don't even have an exception. The board has agreed that we will be slapped by the state controller that we have more than we are allowed to by law because of our situation. So, and the state controller understands it. And when we had our audit and they saw that, they said, that's against the law, but we understand it and we're not saying anything. But for any other school district, they cannot have more than 4% of unassigned fund balance compared to your next year budget, and we have about 10%.
Thank you.
I had a quick question. Yeah. Enrique, just so I can understand better here, with the if the budget were to fail, which of course we hope it doesn't, but if it were, does that mean the tax levy would be at 4.3%, 4.31, or
No,
what?
no. The
Okay.
tax levy, the increase will be 0.
Okay, so
The way you calculate your new budget
Mhm.
is by adding the non-property tax revenues that we said were about $36 million to last year's tax levy. So the tax levy will be a 0% increase. When you are in contingent, it means that you have to use last year's tax levy.
So
You
our
understand?
last year's tax levy was 5.92. So does that mean we're using a tax levy of 5.92 then?
No. Well, Greg, bring us back, please, to the more. There. Thank you. Last year, the tax levy was $46.3 million. If we are in contingent budget, our tax levy is going to be exactly the same, $46.3 million, which is an increase from last year to this year of 0.
Right. And
Lisa?
Okay, but then people are still going to be paying taxes though, so what?
Of
how much would
course,
they be paying?
people, but
Yeah.
there's going to be, if you were paying $10,000 last year in school taxes, this year you're going to pay $10,000 in school taxes. So
It'll be the same
increase
amount.
from last year to this year is 0.
Okay, so it'll be the
sorry,
same
From
amount
this
year
year
they'll pay
to
next year.
next year is 0.
but net wise, right? Because expenses are contracted to go up around 2% on average, right? We have no choice that there will be expenses that have to go up, which means we have to make up that difference through cuts of
Exactly.
significant cuts of programs and faculty and staff,
Or-
right? Which is what nobody wants.
Exactly, and that's why I said in the last row, we will need to make $2 million of expenses that represent 4.31% of the levy. So yeah, I mean, just imagine having to cut $2 million in expenses if you take into account that the average teacher with benefits make $120,000. There you are. You need to cut how many? 16 teachers, 18 teachers.
But it's effectively more because things like raises and benefits continue to go up in cost. So you have even more that you need to cut, right?
Yeah, but when I tell you 120,000 is next year's 120,000, you know, the average teacher not this year, next year will be making 120, so you need to cut about 18 teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, and if it's not only teachers, it's teachers, teacher aides, everything. But at the end of the day, a teacher aide makes with benefits $30,000. So you need to cut, you know, how many? 170 teachers?
Plus, there are restrictions on what we can spend our money on, right? We have additional.
Yeah, the only
restrictions
restriction is administrative. We cannot spend more than, and don't quote me on this, but 7% or 6% of the total budget in administrative. Very likely we might need to cut some administrative expenses. But again, we haven't even started there. When you need to cut $2 million, you need to look everywhere. absolutely everywhere. You need to look at transportation, you need to look at teachers, teacher aides, custodians, secretaries, absolutely everyone gets affected.
I have one additional question. Now, this budget proposal, I just want to make clear to the public, does not include eliminating a team from the middle school. The Finance Committee decided we would leave that money in because of all of the uncertainty due to COVID and students coming back. And we just wanted to leave that cushion in there, so to speak, so that we had a little more wiggle room. So we've included having the teams as they are in the middle school currently.
Again, I agree, Carol. This budget maintains every program, everything like we have it this year.
Right. The only thing we did was add extra funding.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah, we used to call these rollover budgets. It's usually how we start our budget process. If we take everything we have now, roll it over to next year, what the balance is. Obviously, we investigated some other potential reductions, given this really is the first year of the major reduction of Indian Point pilot, and the committee believed that this one-time opportunity really to inject more fund balance as revenue was important to do for a number of reasons. For student supports coming back, whether it be this spring or next fall, and to try to give as big of a break to the taxpayer, given whatever financial situations they've been dealing with because of COVID.
Before we move along, I know Mary Pat was having trouble unmuting, and I don't know if she was able to solve that issue, but I do want to give her a chance to make comments, questions, if she would like to. Greg, can you check in with her and see if she has that issue resolved? It looks like her phone still has the mute symbol on there.
I just tried to ask her to unmute.
Enrique, while we're waiting for her, I don't know if you have this number. How many entities pay taxes? Meaning, how many houses are there? How many businesses? How many entities do we collect taxes from? Do you know that?
I used to know that. I'll ask Town of Portland, and I'll tell you next board meeting. Unfortunately, I don't remember, but I remember about 5-6 years ago, a board member asked, and I called the Town of Portland, and they gave me the number. I'll be sure to have it for the next board meeting.
Okay, also keep in mind, like some teachers are my age, right? So we're kind of, look, I don't want any teacher to retire because I happen to think your best ones are my age, to tell you the truth. But also noticing that too. So I think we're going to have quite a few who are my age who might not be, maybe over the next 5 or 6 years, might choose to put their butts in the sand after a while on the beach. Right? I'm thinking maybe that too. So that would save quite a bit of money too.
It does, but that's part of a school district. You know, every year we have between 7 and 12 teachers retiring. Obviously, this year that we needed more, we only have 4. So if this year we have 4, probably next year we are going to have 15, because it averages out over the long term. You know, everyone basically has the same idea. I want to work, max out my TRS, and then why to continue working here if I can do something else and have 2 salaries. So it's part of the culture.
Right. How many more bonds do we have coming to expiration in the next decade?
All of them, but the new capital project. That means in 23, 24, we have the ones for the 2004, that was 2 of $17 million. Then we have the 6.9 and the 4.6. And then we will only have, if we don't, hoping that we don't have anything else.
That's not me, by the way.
That's it. So we will only have these $18.5 million.
What was the one from 2004? 2.7, 27, what'd you say?
No, 2 of 17 million. There were one next to the other one of 17 million. It was a total of about 32 million, 34 million, something like that. I can tell you.
You don't have to. I'm just looking at different ways that money should be eventually coming in when the bonds go away. I'm just looking at different things. That's all. But I would love if you could get me that number of the entities that pay taxes, whether it be a business or a home.
Yes, I understand. How many
Vacant property.
How many entities are in our tax rules?
Right.
That's what you want to know.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to give Mary Pat a minute to, we're trying to reboot her here so that she can rejoin the conversation. Anybody else have questions in the meanwhile? All right, I have a housekeeping question. Do you guys want to have a break before we go to audience comments? 5 minutes, stretch your legs, get some water break. We'll finish up this discussion and then have a short break and then come back for audience comments and our policy reading.
And you need to vote.
Oh yeah, we'll vote first, but we have to have Mary Pat weigh in before we do that.
Sure.
That's what I meant by finish this section, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm in favor of a recess.
We can recess.
I just
All right,
heard
Mary
her.
Pat, I can hear you.
Yeah, I just said, I know, I just signed back in. It was star 6. That was the only thing. That's what I was asking.
Oh, well,
That's
okay,
the-
that's good to know for the
that's
future.
the
I don't
easy
know how to
question.
do it on my phone because I use my computer audio and that's a whole different
No.
thing. But we were just, I was just asking if anybody wanted to stretch your leg break before the next section while we were waiting for you to sign back in. And the consensus was, yes, we'd like a stretch our leg break, but we need to finish the board resolution on the budget first. And if you have any questions or comments, you've got the floor.
No, my main thing was just to, again, I was just to clarify with Alex because she was asking about the use of the fund balance, and we have used it every single year.
Every year.
So, yep. So I thought that was important that, that she be aware of that, that this wasn't just some random thing to, offset. It was actually something, and frankly, it's less this year than we've used in the past. I mean, this wasn't, we've used more, we've used less, but this was this was not an extraordinary amount. So, but that was what I wanted to make sure. But Enrique did cover that, so thank you, Enrique.
Yes, thanks.
All right, so is everybody happy with the budget here? Because we're going to vote on our resolution and then we don't have the opportunity to change it afterwards. So any last minute comments or questions? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the resolution as stated?
Oh, I've never seen that before.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mary Pat, since I can't see your hand, were you in yay or nay?
I said aye. Yep.
Okay. All right, all in favor.